Alright, before you go yelling at me in the comment section, give me a second to explain what my point is in this video. But first, just before I get to that, if you are new, I do upload daily NBA content on this channel, so if that is something you're interested in, then subscribe. Also, drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference. Also, episode 11 of my NBA series for the Philadelphia 76ers is out now, so if you have not watched that one yet, then please go do so. But with that out of the way, Giannis just signed a Supermax contract with the Milwaukee Bucks, and I believe that this was a pretty big mistake. Now, don't get me wrong. This is what I imagine a lot of people are going to think, right, just from reading the title and the thumbnail. I don't want Giannis to leave the Bucks. Never really did. While the idea of, like, let's say a Giannis and Luka duo or a Giannis and Steph duo was definitely interesting and would be fun to watch, I didn't think that was actually good for the NBA. And while I've definitely hypothesized what Giannis would look like on another team, I always wanted him to stick with the Milwaukee Bucks because that's what's good for the NBA, and what's good for the NBA is good for the sport that I love, the league I love, and it's good for me business-wise. So I want the NBA to do well, and Giannis sticking with the Bucks is doing that. I think the NBA has had an issue with small markets for quite a long time now, and a player of Giannis's caliber committing to a team like the Milwaukee Bucks rather than trying to join up on some other super team is definitely a good sign for the direction of the league. I also really like loyalty, as much as I'm also very pro-player movement. I also like parity. I don't like super teams being formed, and I like when a franchise can actually be stable because their star player is committed to them. However, while I believe this was good for the NBA, and it's obviously good for the Milwaukee Bucks, I don't know that it was good for Giannis. Not because going to another team would have been best for Giannis. Maybe on the surface, yeah, he probably wins more championships if he goes and joins Luka Doncic. There are other factors outside of winning championships. There's also your legacy, the reputation of having loyalty, all of that stuff. It depends from player to player how much that actually matters to them. But I think loyalty matters quite a bit to Giannis, so it makes sense that he would sign this contract. However, I would argue that the entire reason that the Milwaukee Bucks even traded for Jrue Holiday in the first place and tried to make that move for Bogdan Bogdanovic and have been on the top of their game in terms of trying to acquire talent to put around Giannis was because of the threat of him leaving in free agency. Giannis Antetokounmpo is an incredible talent, and the Bucks have fought tooth and nail to keep him on the team, rightfully so. But now that he has signed a 5-year contract, they don't have to fight nearly as hard because for the next 5 years, Giannis is going to be on the team. I believe Giannis is 25 years old right now. So Giannis is going to be a Milwaukee Buck until he's 30, unless later on in his career he demands a trade. So the issue that comes up is that the pressure on the Milwaukee Bucks organization that existed in this year's offseason that got them to make the move that they did for Jrue Holiday is now gone. And while it is hard for someone to turn down $226 million, I think it was, guaranteed. This is the biggest contract in NBA history, which I can't say I'm surprised by. At the same time, in terms of, I don't think that money was that huge of a factor to Giannis. On top of this, what I would want Giannis to do would be to sign a 1+1 contract. So he signs for like $45 million for a 1-year extension, and then he has a player option for the next season. It's kind of like the contract that Kawhi Leonard signed with the Clippers. He signed a 2+1, so he would be able to keep pressure on the Los Angeles Clippers to try and put a good team around him because, hey, if you guys fuck up, I can just leave. I'm not tied down anywhere. This is also something that LeBron James has done in the past. He has not signed long contracts. I believe his first contract with the Cavaliers was a 2-year. If I'm remembering correctly, I might not be. And he just signs these deals in the hopes that this is going to put pressure on the team to make sure they put the proper pieces around him and do what I want. Kind of bend the team to his will, or at the very least make them be proactive about trying to put talent around him. This is a strategy that I think most superstars in the league should employ, provided they are not injury-prone type of players. If Giannis was an injury-prone guy, then yeah, signing a 5-year, $226 million deal is an unquestionably like the right thing to do, because if he's one of those guys who has a risk of like a career-ending injury, then I would rather just have that financial security if that's a big factor for you. Even then, though, Kawhi Leonard, who is kind of a guy who could just have a career-ending injury at any point because he has that issue with his quad that's kind of just going to hold him back in the long term. Even he is doing these 1+1 or 2+1 contracts, and that's what I believe Giannis should have done. I really think that it's unfortunate that this is how it works, but I think the Milwaukee Bucks front office is going to get complacent now. If Giannis is committed to the Bucks long term and we don't make any really good moves for the next 2-3 years, I mean, what's really the consequence? He's still going to be under contract for another 2-3 years. I mean, we can start doing stuff then. And that's a couple years of Giannis's prime that were potentially wasted because the Milwaukee Bucks front office, their talent wasn't there enough. So, but they didn't feel the pressure to get it even better. So that incentive is not quite there. This is going to be a weird comparison, but it's kind of like how this works. Like, it's like with NBA 2K, because they have no competition whatsoever, their incentive to actually make the game fantastic is not nearly as much there, because their sales continue to go up because there is literally no competition from NBA Live. And that's because there is no threat from the outside. Everything can stay internal because what they have is what they have. The Milwaukee Bucks, now that they have Giannis on this 5-year deal, even though they're still going to try to improve the team because they're always going to do that, their desperation and their overall drive to do so is not going to be nearly as significant as it would be if Giannis had consistently dangled the threat of potentially leaving over their heads. And if the Milwaukee Bucks end up not winning a championship over the next couple of years, and Giannis could have potentially got out early because of a contract that would have been a 1+1 or a 2+1, this is going to be a huge mistake for him. And I am hopeful that the Bucks are going to go in the right direction regardless. Also, I do want to point out, Brook Lopez is like 32. Drew Holiday is 30. I believe Chris Middleton is not that far from 30. So a lot of these guys on the Bucks right now are not going to be here towards the end of this contract, or they're going to be much worse players. So that's a factor as well. Just overall, I'm not exactly thrilled to see Giannis putting a huge, signing something that could potentially waste his prime. I'm not saying sticking with the Bucks is going to waste his prime, but he could have had insurance that it's not going to by signing a 1+1. It's still possible that they will, so that contract gives him that insurance and gives him the flexibility to potentially butt out if that's what he needs to do. And unfortunately, Giannis did not make that decision. Now, as I said, I still think the Milwaukee Bucks are going to work to try and put a contender around him because winning a championship is the goal. But it's just that lack of desperation, that lack of drive is going to be pretty significant in terms of the actual roster changes that you see with this team. The whole reason that they traded for Drew Holiday in the first place, even though, yeah, they definitely overpaid, was that Giannis leaving in free agency was a real threat, and they felt that the Bucks roster as a whole, and I believe Giannis felt this way as well, was not quite good enough to be a contender. And trading for Drew Holiday, or I should say, not good enough to be a contender, not good enough to win a championship. And Drew Holiday being added to the roster, I do think makes this team good enough to win a championship. I still pick the Lakers over them this year and maybe even next year. But it is definitely a much improved roster, and I could even see them winning a championship this year. And for that reason, Giannis being able to leverage his potential leaving is what has pretty much directly led to them building a real championship threat rather than just a contender. And for that reason, I believe Giannis could have kept that pressure on for years to come, and now that pressure is gone. I think I've made my point, though. I'm glad Giannis is in Milwaukee. I wanted him to stay in Milwaukee because I believe what is good for the small franchises in the league tends to be good for the NBA. I think part of the reason why revenue and why the NBA's overall business has dropped a little bit outside of all the stuff that went down this season, it's still been on a downward trend, and the reason for that, I believe, is because the air of parity and just being able to be a fan of a team that's not the Lakers, Celtics, Warriors, Spurs, or just like any of those top franchises, because so often these small market teams just get shafted by the fact that they're small market teams. And I think if you're a fan of a small market team, Giannis signing this deal is pretty huge, and it's a good sign for small markets in the future. But for Giannis individually, I would have liked him to continue to keep the pressure on the Bucks, and doesn't look like that's going to be happening. But I've made my point clear. Again, go check out that My NBA video if you have not yet. But that is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.